What are some scary facts about cartoon characters? Story 1. Basically every antagonist in Pinocchio, including Stromboli, Monstro, and especially the coachman. The coachman's devil face gave me nightmares, and his whole scheme of kidnapping boys and having them turned into donkeys is scary crap. There's nothing more horrifying in all of animated history than Lampwick's transformation into a donkey while he screams for his mother. Story 2. There's an 80s movie titled The Last Unicorn. There's a traveling old witch that embraces and gets creepingly overjoyed by her upcoming death at some point, being killed and eaten by a giant, scary, three-breasted bird. My parents rented me this movie when I was like 6. Story 3. Personally, for me, I know it's not a popular choice and not at the top of my personal scary cartoon characters list, and that you might disagree with me, but I do think it deserves a mention. I find Azula very scary. I agree that she's definitely a badass, but that sinister look and voice sends chills down my spine. What's scarier is not only her backstory, but the fact she grew up as a pure maniacal supervillain. Azula is for sure one of the scariest female cartoon characters I've ever seen, and she is only 14. Mai is another one. I know she redeemed, but that gothic appearance and the blades that are suddenly thrown out of her hands scared me too. Story 4. Sid from Toy Story. I'm not sure if it was the animation or if it was just the kid himself. I still can't watch that movie without having flashbacks from my childhood. Not just Sid, his toys as well. The Toy Story universe is secretly a dark place. Not only do toys come to life, but so do any inanimate objects you usually play with, including toys. An R-rated Toy Story would be a lot like Sausage Party. Oh, and since I just mentioned Sausage Party, it is also undoubtedly a scary cartoon, and yes, it is R-rated. What would this thread be if we hadn't mentioned it? Seth Rogen was trying to pull a prank with this film by using marketing to make it look like a kids' movie to make parents believe they could take their kids. And then they finally find out it's R-rated and instantly change their mind. I wouldn't even dare to talk about that ending in Sausage Party. It becomes nightmare fuel once mentioned. Story 5. Came in here looking for the dark creature that is Gumby. I don't think I can articulate properly just how unsettling Gumby the show was to me as a child. And this is coming from someone who grew up with Spawn on HBO. I feel like they were aiming for something akin to a Toy Story, but the stop motion, stark white backdrops, and just unsettling character design unnerved me to no end. The stop motion itself isn't the problem, Coraline. Nightmare Before Christmas and Corpse Bride are favorites of mine, but that's likely due to Tim Burton's mastery. Gumby was not mastery. Gumby was a 9-year-old's fever dream played out on a television screen. Story 6. Zim from Invader Zim. He ate other people's organs to become more human and ripped this kid's eyes out because he bugged him. I rewatched the show as a teen and loved it, LOL. Another would be any character from the marvelous misadventures of Flapjack. Flapjack's guardian is a greedy pirate who bet him away and a sad whale. Also, the art style is creepy, but I like it. Story 7. Okay, so this is an old one. When I was a kid, I watched the real Ghostbusters Wing cartoon show. I loved it, probably more than the movies, but they had one ghost that even today I can't think about too much. While most ghosts were one-off villains, there was one who was recurring, the Boogeyman. He had an enormous head and wild hair. He wore a suit jacket but no pants. He was terrifying to little me. I have seen the episodes since, and they aren't super scary, but that guy himself conjures up terrible memories. Story 8, I'm not afraid of them anymore, but when I was in 3rd to 5th grade, I had an odd fear of The Simpsons. I think it started when I had a nightmare about them for some reason, and I woke up in the middle of the night really freaked out. It was pretty inexplicable to me even then, because I knew there was nothing to be afraid of. I was always afraid of characters with huge eyes, but it's not like I hadn't ever seen them before. I think it might have been a combination of dealing with OCD and anxiety at the time that I projected on The Simpsons, since it was a show I wasn't allowed to watch, and because of their aforementioned huge eyes. Every time I saw a picture or an ad for the show, I would get this intense anxiety that I would dream about them. I knew it was irrational and I was so embarrassed, but I had a hard time talking myself down sometimes. Story 9, I have 3, the Grundle from the real Ghostbusters. It's a creature that attaches to kids and compels them to misbehave. Over time, the kid starts transforming into a Grundle and starts committing darker and darker deeds until they completely lose their humanity. The Vathek from Extreme Ghostbusters. The main antagonists of this episode, without any kid-friendly hocus pocus, surgically mutilate people into inhuman creatures while using the pain of the unanesthetic surgery to break the minds of their victims and turn them into their slaves. In the end, everyone went back to normal after the Vathek were defeated, but it was still very disturbing. 3. Zombie Mom from Martin Mystery. The plot is that they get stuck in a cabin possessed by an evil spirit that developed major abandonment issues after their lover left them in life and imprisons people unfortunate enough to stumble upon said cabin by turning them into zombies. The high fright point of this episode is when we get a close-up of the distorted smile of a possessed mom. It's pretty much a FNAF level jump scare. Story 10. This makes zero sense, but when I was a kid I remember watching some sort of Dr. Seuss cartoon on VHS. One of the only details I remember is, at some point, there was a parade of Chinese people banging drums. For some reason, the way these people were animated scared the heck out of me. I shut the TV off, ran out of the room crying, and had nightmares for quite a few nights afterward. Not sure what this cartoon was and can't find any info on it. Halfway convinced it was a fever dream. Story 11. King Rams from Courage the Cowardly Dog. The guy who wanted his slab back. Basically, it was because I had the Scooby-Doo and the Alien Invaders on VHS. And if anyone remembers back in the day when they would put a random cartoon episode after the movie credits. Well, the episode I had was the one with King Ramses, and I would fall asleep with this movie on regularly and wake up in the middle of the night and just hear "Return the Slab." Then I'd go to sleep and have various nightmares about that jerk. Not so scary anymore, but tell younger me that. Story 12, Yami Yugi from Yu-Gi-Oh! Because the Yu-Gi-Oh! I saw as a kid when I tried to get into it was in the early days of YouTube, where every anime ever was uploaded. There, I found this odd little series called Yu-Gi-Oh! Season 0. Yami, or Atem, was not a proper hero here. He was everything. That was an anti-hero. He delivered swift justice to the lowest society chucked at his feet, but always ensured they suffered. In the manga, he has a kill count. From this time onward, burning people alive, causing electrocutions, psychological torment. He is utterly terrifying. Sure, the later series had utterly terrifying moments, but this is the little crap. And I say this in the most loving way possible. Who made a fire maze and electrocuted people? They're the same character, in the same timeline. Since the original series is called back to frequently, with scenes mentioning how Yugi got the puzzle, how his friends swiped it initially, the beating they got, among other things. He's a murder ghost and we love him for it. And the show sometimes reminds us that he's never really changed. It's ironic because when we get to the Millennium World arc, we see Pharaoh Atem is a newbie to this king's business, has no idea what he's really doing, but damn it if he isn't doing his best and he's beloved and just in his actions. But it also makes you wonder. We're seeing this Atem, the one who after a 50,000-year sleep, who developed from an amnesiac murder ghost. When he woke up, we can only assume this is what Atem was like when he was having a bad day. Story 13. All of the trains from Chuggington. The trains control everything and have the ability to go where they want and do whatever pleases them. You only ever see a few humans. They're kept alive to keep the trains running, but they're just the train's pets. The areas where the trains get lost are these rusted, abandoned areas where humans used to live. There's an excessive amount of train tracks everywhere. There's train tracks to the zoo and to the farms, and in between all the city streets, wake up sheeple. The trains are the result of AI gone wild. They've killed 99% of the population and only keep a few subservient people around for the sweet opposable thumbs. Story 14. Okay, listen. There's this movie from 1971 called The Point. It's an animated movie about a kid named Oblio who has a round head in a society of people with pointed heads. Oblio gets shunned from his village and sent to the forest to wander for all of eternity because his round head just isn't the vibe. In said forest, he confronts Nightmare Fuel, a character called the Pointed Man. The Pointed Man has 3 heads each with their own distinct voice, and the whole purpose of this character is to throw Oblio off course and get him even more lost in the forest and without a sense of direction. I had to watch it in my philosophy class for uni. We watched it over 3 class periods, and every single time that man came on the screen, I was horrified. Even thinking of him gives me a visceral reaction. I feel panicked when I imagine him. I hate him. It should be made known that I'm a grown woman having this reaction. He scares me on a fundamental level that I've yet to experience in any other scenario. It incites my fight or flight instincts. The whole movie is on YouTube if you're interested. It's a nightmare that was allegedly written while the creator was tripping. I recommend it for any of the brave souls out there who really like philosophy, I guess. Story 15. The Mother Nature sequence from Fantasia. Most specifically, That terrifying as hell lava bird thing that was attacking her. Keep in mind, I watched this sequence for the first time when I was in third grade. I was 7, 8 at the time. At that time, I was one of those weird kids who weren't afraid of literally almost everything. Not even the secret of Nimb, not even the black cauldron, not even pink elephants on parade, not even Snow White's forest scene, Coraline's mom, the Red Bull, or Night on Bald Mountain. If anything, I was that one little weirdo who found scary crap like that cool. But that lava bird thing, man, holy hell did that thing always give me a heart attack, even now, almost a decade later. And don't get me started on Chihiro's parents turning into pigs from Spirited Away. That was by far the only contender to that stupid lava bird. But that was because I was afraid that could happen to my family. I was terrified as hell of eating soup for a few weeks after that because of that. But then again, considering how old I was when I first watched Spirited Away, I was only 6 years old when I watched it for the first time. So on the one hand, I couldn't fully understand what was going on, and on the other hand, that was before my scary animation is cool phase that I had in third grade. Story 16, Bugs Bunny. Bugs is essentially a trickster god with immediate control over the fabric of reality. He's also shown that he is fully capable of removing himself from the world and rewriting time and space as he sees fit. This would not be too bad, if not for the fact that, while he is never really outright malevolent, he is, at the very least, homicidally mischievous. Any enemy he has ever made, even in passing, becomes a target for the remainder of their lives. Granted, at least one of those enemies is actively attempting to murder him. But considering Bug's alarmingly disproportionate response to any slight, real or imagined, this is pretty understandable. What makes him creepy is that he is very clearly enjoying the crap out of those disproportionate responses. When he torments, seriously torments, any of his adversaries, he is very obviously doing it for giggles alone. Bugs can rewrite reality. He could very easily remove himself from danger on a whim in any one of honestly infinite ways. But instead, he always chooses to torture any and all who dares cross him, very often leaving his opponents shattered, their minds twisted, and their psyches completely broken. Literally insane for the terrible sin of getting in the rabbit's way. And Bugs just laughs and laughs and laughs and laughs. Story 17, hands down, Thomas the Tank Engine and all his little machine buddies. They are trains that are stuck on tracks. That alone would suck so bad it would drive you into a depressive state. They live in a weirdly utilitarian world where your worth is judged solely on how useful you are. They are autonomous, but yet they need people to drive them. How messed is that for those people? It's like this goddamn train has a mind of its own. Also, they are like selfish, bratty children all the time. Story 18, Peter Rabbit. My little sister watches it, and they do not pull their punches. Oh, Peter, be careful. Last time your father went out, he was eaten alive. Come here, Peter Rabbit. I'll put you in my Christmas dinner and chomp you right up. The farmer has a gun, which he fires regularly. The mother always sends the children out to do the dirty work, and they usually have to outsmart the fox, the one that ate their father. If they do not complete whichever task the mother sends them out to do, they run the risk of not being able to eat and survive. All three villain-type characters make it very clear that they would very much like to eat all the rabbits, and that they wouldn't even spare the baby rabbits. Story 19, Grizzly Tales for Gruesome Kids, a British show that seems like it was actively trying to traumatize its audience. I was scared for years of being in the same room as a flushing toilet, because I thought of the episode where a toilet paper mummy coated the protagonist alive in toilet paper, then sucked them down the toilet to his private hell dimension. There's also the episode that's a parody of Enid Blyton's work, where some kids steal apples from a farmer. The chipper chums go scrumping, so he poisons the apples and shoots their dog. Everyone dies but the farmer. The farmer then presses their bodies in his cider press to extract the apples they ate. There was another episode where the protagonist is neglected by his workaholic parents and eventually is sucked into the world of his strange, cult-like drawings that he draws alone in his room. His parents never notice him vanishing as they're too involved in their work, while he assimilates into the drawing world and becomes one of them. The narrator for the show talked like he actively hated kids and relished their suffering. And the intro includes someone entering a theater where he chows down on squirming cockroaches in a bag before the episode starts, as projected by the creepy narrator. It's strange how popular a show it was among children for coming off as if it unrelentingly hated children. I suppose at least it wasn't condescending at the least, just horrifying. It gave you a level of engagement you didn't get from most adults. It also regularly featured outright abusive or neglectful parents and uncaring adult figures, which frankly makes a lot more sense to someone dealing with parents like that than media that constantly portrayed everything as happy families. Probably why it was one of the most popular kids' TV shows in the UK at the time, even if it horrified most foreign audiences. Story 20. Teletubbies never seemed creepy to me, but my daughter would have the weirdest behavioral change as soon as it came on. She was barely 2 years old with no attention span to speak of. But as soon as that show came on, she would sit down directly in front of the screen and stay that way until it was off. She didn't make a sound or move a muscle the whole time. When it was over, she'd come out of this trance like state and just resume whatever she had been doing, like the show had never come on. Story 21. Not sure if it really counts, but Kipper, a show about an orange dog based on books by the same name, comes to mind for me. It wasn't so much scary or blatantly weird as it was strangely eerie and empty. It had this strange, very minimal art style where they only drew a few foreground elements and left the rest as an eerie white void. And aside from Kipper himself and a few friends, the show is entirely devoid of other characters, with the exception one episode. And all of them almost always speak with this strange, quiet calmness. It sounds weirdly devoid of emotion and meaning, aside from this weird sense of loneliness or maybe melancholy. At least that's how I interpret it. Looking back, the VHS artifacting probably didn't help its case in the Eerie department. Story 22. My teacher mentioned this about Max and Ruby. Ruby is a horrible caretaker. Not only does she leave Max to possibly harm himself, but she's constantly wishing to get away from her brother. They have no parents, and the grandmother doesn't even come to take Max from his horrible parenting. It's almost as if nobody wanted Max, yet Ruby was essentially dumped with him, but has better things to do in life. Think of all the mental issues that can cause when Max gets older: depression, anxiety, even dark thoughts. Max was just left there. Nobody wanted to watch over him. He didn't have any friends and didn't go to school. Story 23. I remember watching a children's horror show, but I don't know the name. It was always a different horror story. And the opening was in a cinema where a couple of kids were eating popcorn. They'd find something gross in them, like fingers or something. I remember one story about a kid that ate candy at a candy store and got turned into a conscient yet paralyzed candy kid, put on display by the window. He would then see his mother pass by, and she wouldn't recognize him. That was traumatic. Another episode was about some kids stealing apples or something, and the property owner caught them and used their blood to make the juice or wine or whatever he produced. The animation was like a Play-Doh looking. I would love to find out what it's called and rewatch it. Story 24. I went through a weird phase from about 7 years old to probably around 13 or 14, where Disney's animated Alice in Wonderland terrified me. The scene where she gets lost in the woods was the one that genuinely gave me nightmares, but the walrus creeped me out. I hated the Queen of Hearts, and the scene where she cries a flood is just no. By 14, I had started getting into actual horror movies, and suddenly the things I found creepy were mild compared to the things I was now scared of. Let's just say mirrors brought back my childhood fear of mirrors after a cousin told me about Bloody Mary. As an adult, I do not blame preteen me for finding Alice in Wonderland scary. It has some deeply unsettling imagery, and now I recognize the uncanny valley when I see it. Story 25. The Animals of Farthing Wood. I doubt many Americans have heard of it, but it is dark as hell. It follows a group of woodland creatures trying to find a new habitat, and there are probably more named character deaths than Game of Thrones. Some scenes of note: a bunch of field mice get impaled on thorns by birds. The pheasant goes mad when he sees his wife's cooked body cooling on the farmer's window. The hedgehog couple are too afraid to cross the motorway and instead choose to die together by curling into balls. It is absolutely brutal. Story 26. Mentioning Invader Zim, too. The premise seems perfect for a fish out of water story about an alien trying to fit in with humans and learning to love the Earth since they never fit in with the other aliens. But instead, it's about an alien who actively hates everything about Earth and its filthy humans and wants to do nothing more than take it over. It's such an antithesis to storytelling having the main character be a straight-up villain, not an anti-hero or anti-villain, especially because it's animated too. Nowadays, cartoon leads have to be aggressively relatable and good, to the point that the socially awkward hero archetype has become overused. Story 27. Bambi. Because there's no villain, there's no evil that has a face and can be defeated. Fires start because of human carelessness, and Bobmi's mom dies because hunters kill. And then there is the brutal nature, so humans are just one of many variables outside of characters' control. Characters can't get any justice when something bad happens. That is simply the reality they live in. There's also no comforting tale or a song to make it sound okay. Life just goes on for those who survive. Story 28. Batman Beyond was really dark. First episode has Terry's dad murdered, not as a backstory, but in the main story. There are characters who get genetic modifications, as if it's basic cosmetic surgery. You get characters who suffer a fate worse than death, like being turned into a pile of conscious sludge or falling into the center of the earth. One of the darkest ones I remember had a surgeon tricked into helping a group of villains with superpower mods or something before learning they lied. The episode ended with him putting the ringleader under with the ringleader, unaware he'd learned the truth. And that doesn't even go into Return of the Joker. When I rewatched it years later, I was stunned that there were any recurring villains because they seemed to die at the end of each episode.